Hi, I'm Opal Mitchell. I work for the Central Arkansas Library System and I work at the Nixon branch in Jacksonville. And this is the Crafting with Opal program that I do on Thursdays at 4 o'clock. Today I'm doing a sewing tutorial on how to do a grocery bag holder. It's a really quick one. Actually, I got it from the internet, and I think the tutorial actually says it's a 10-minute project, so it could be about, I guess, that quick. The major part of this one is just really measuring and getting the fabric cut out, and you're going to need just some fabric, a little bit of elastic, and ribbon, and that's really all the supplies you need besides the sewing supplies you're going to need, like a sewing machine and so forth. But I'm going to go ahead and switch the camera over so I can kind of show you the supplies. And that's the rest of the room here, but here's the supplies, and I'm going to see if I can lift this up a little bit so we can get a better view of the table. Alrighty, this is the fabric that I'm using. I provided supplies for the people that wanted them for this project, and you got a piece of fabric that was a little bit bigger than 22 inches by 18 inches. And so to begin this project, you're going to need to cut a piece of fabric down to 22 by 18 inches, and you'll need a piece of elastic, preferably about one that's about 1/4 of an inch wide. And you're going to cut that down, that piece of elastic down to about 8 inches. I think I tried to give a little more than 8 inches to the people that got the supplies, so be sure to go ahead and cut that down to that size. So have that ready, and then also have your piece of fabric cut out and ready. And also you will have a piece of ribbon. They said to make the ribbon 8 inches long. That was a little too long in my opinion. Mine is about 5 inches because I don't want a really tall piece of ribbon to hang my bag from. So you can start with 8 inches and look when you get done with your project, and when this is the last thing you sew onto it. So if you decide you want it to be that long, yeah, cool. I mean, if you want to, because once it's folded in half, the 8-inch piece is going to be 4 inches long. So this one's, like I said, about 5 inches. It's probably more like 4.5 inches. So folded in half, it's a little over 2 inches. That's plenty long for the hook I'm going to be hanging my bag from. So that's more of a preference. And whenever I folded mine in half, I used some pinking shears to cut the edge so it won't fray so much. So that's helpful too if you've got some pinking shears. So that's what these are. So those would be good to have on hand. You're also going to need at least one safety pin for your elastic because we're going to be feeding the elastic through one edge of the fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and pin my pin through the end of my elastic because that's what we're going to be doing at one point. So I'm going to have that ready. So to get started with this project, you can measure your fabric however you find easiest as far as getting your measurements and straight edges. I prefer having a self-healing mat and a rotary cutter, and then also some of these quilting rulers to do this with, because I get really nice edges by using them. You can also, if you don't have these, you can always use a tape measure and a fabric marker to mark your pieces, and then just cut it with your scissors. It's however you want to do it. I just prefer doing it this way because it's faster, and I get a lot better straight edges whenever I do it that way. Alright, once you get all of those pieces cut out, what you're going to do is on your short edges, your 18-inch sides, because this is 22 inches on these sides right here. This is my 18-inch sides over here. And what we're going to do is I've already done this to one end of it, but you're going to do this to both ends. This is the wrong side of the fabric, and this is the right side. And you're going to fold this edge over twice by a 1/2 inch. So I folded it once by a 1/2 inch, and then I folded it a second time by a 1/2 inch to get this edge, and then I ironed it down with my iron. So and I did that to the entire edge so it will lay flat. I'm going to go ahead and do that to the other side, and in order to do that I'm going to move this over to the ironing board area. So let's see, that's all the way over here, and make sure that you have your iron heated up and ready to go. So to do that, if you need something to measure to kind of, this one right here is another one of those quilting rulers, and it's got a 1/2 inch already measured on the edge of it. They do this a lot with quilting. So you can, if you're not real sure about eyeballing it, you can lay it down on your fabric and figure out what a 1/2 inch is. So you're going to fold your fabric over by a 1/2 inch once, and then you're going to fold it over twice, and then you're going to iron it. So I'm going to move that out of the way because I'm going to kind of eyeball a 1/2 inch on mine, because this is not, as long as you get it at least a 1/2 inch. If it's a little bit wider than a 1/2 inch, that's okay. You just want at least a 1/2 inch for the elastic to go through, because you're going to be feeding the elastic through one end of the fabric. Trying not to get, I can't tell if how much I'm getting in the way of the camera here while I'm doing this. And I'm just going to, and if it's easier to fold one edge first and iron it down with your iron, and then doing the second fold and then ironing it, yeah, do it that way. I'm just kind of doing this quickly because mine does a really good job of pressing. This particular iron does, so it's holding it down in place for me as I fold it and iron it. So make sure I've gotten that a little bit tighter. Okay. And once you've got both edges ironed, then we're going to move over to this sewing machine and sew these edges down. So I'm going to move the camera over to where the sewing machine is located, and then I'm going to lower it down, but I'll also have to turn the camera upwards so you can see that. I'm going to move this in, and it looks like I'm going to have to lower it a little bit more because this is going to be a little too high. So I'm going to tilt that up and lower this down and move in a little bit more. Let's see how we can do this. Alrighty. And as far as your settings on your sewing machine, you just want to set it where, let me move some of my stuff out of the way. You're going to be sewing down this far edge over here. So what I'm going to do, because my machine will allow me to do this, the foot is about the width of this actually folded edge, and I'm going to set that down on top of it where it's right down the middle. My needle's all the way over here. I'm going to move my needle all the way to the other side. So I'm just going to move it over there. Actually, I need to adjust my thread. So now, and I'll have to do some back stitching. That way, now when I sew, it's going to sew on this side of my fabric. And That way I will have this edge open for whenever I feed, if I decide on this side to feed the elastic through. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some backup stitches, which actually I want to move this over just a tiny bit more because I want to get this as close to this edge as possible. Actually, I'm going to line it up right there. That'll be better. Okay, so I'm going to back up some stitches first to reinforce where I'm starting. And how I'm keeping this straight, there is a marking right here that I'm keeping my fabric lined up with, and that helps me keep a nice straight edge on the other side. And I didn't pin any of this down, and if you feel more comfortable pinning the fabric down after you've ironed it flat, then do that. But mine's going to stay in place pretty good, so I'm not worried about it. And always remember, whenever you're sewing, to let the machine pull the fabric through. Do not ever push your fabric into the machine because it's pulling it through for you. You're just guiding it to keep it straight. And slow and steady is better than zipping through really quickly because you're going to not get a straight edge if you go through fast. And when you get to the end, you're going to do a backup stitch to reinforce it. So I'm going to get to the end, and then I'm going to back up, and then sew to the end. All right. So that's the first part. And I'm cutting that off. And when you get done, you just look at it and make sure that you got closer to this edge and left a big enough opening to feed your elastic through. And that looks like I did a pretty good job of keeping that straight. Yep. So I'm going to cut off the excess threads on the end here. I'm going to flip it over. We're going to do the exact same thing to the other end. So I'm going to line it up like I did last time. And we'll do up some backup stitches first to reinforce it. Okay. Okay, and I got it started, so now we'll just sew all the way down. Now, of course, if you were working with fabric that had writing on it or designs that went in a certain direction, you're going to have to be a little more careful with this design, making sure they're going the direction that you want them to, because this one end of this is going to be the top and one's going to be the bottom. So if your design of the fabric has a direction, make sure it's going to go back and forth this direction, the design, instead of this way, because once you put it together, it won't look right if your designs are going in this direction and not this, back and forth this way. I had that problem with some fabric at home that I was thinking of using for this project initially. Everything was going to be sideways instead of up and down if I used it, so I decided not to use that fabric. Now, this is also a project where if I'm just using regular fabric for this, If you wanted the bag to be a little bit stiffer when it's hanging on the wall, when it doesn't really have anything in it, and then you could always use some interfacing that you could iron onto the fabric first before you do all of this. And that would make the bag stand up straighter and keep its shape when it doesn't really have much in it. But that's just up to you. Okay, almost to the end. Now I'm going to back up. Alrighty. So there we go. And now we're going to be... Also, the people that signed up for this project to get supplies, I also gave them a printout of the directions too. So that's another thing that I do for the sewing classes when we do them virtually like this. I will always give you, or try to give you, printed directions also on the project that you're going to be working on. Okay, so now we're going to take our elastic, and if you haven't already attached the safety pin to it, then you're going to attach a safety pin to it. So I'm going to start feeding it through the end here, and I'm only going to feed it through far enough that this end goes into it, because we're going to have to sew this piece of elastic in place before going all the way to the other end. Okay, so you want to do it until your elastic just about disappears into the fabric. I'm going to pull it in just a little bit more. Alright, so do you want to make sure that you know where the elastic is? And my camera's going to fall forward. Don't want that to happen. I think I fed it in a little too much. Let me pull it back out again. Alright. Okay, so you want to have it all the way to the end, and what we're going to do, because my elastic's right here all the way to the end, I'm going to sew across that to sew the elastic in place. So I'm going to go back over here, and going to make sure it's going, my thing's going to actually sew over it. Alright, so I'm going to start with the needle in there. And since this is a piece that might not be able to get through easily, I'm going to grab a hold of this thread to help pull it through. I'm going to sew forward. And I want it to stop in the elastic. And now I want to reverse. You want to make sure it sticks in there good. And then I'm just going to sew over it again. Alright. There we go. And it's just really to hold it into place while we pull the rest of the elastic through. So it doesn't have to be like just enough to hold it there. So I'm going to cut all the elastic, or not elastic, all the threads. So now my elastic's going to be held in place. And I'm going to move back over here. And now I'm going to find where the safety pin is at, and I'm going to continue to feed this through to the other end. Sounds like it's raining again outside. And if you've never worked with elastic before, this is a nice beginner's project for working with elastic. Okay, there's my safety pin. And you want to pull it all the way through to the end. And I'm going to kind of leave. Okay, so now you notice it's bunching up on us. So now I'm going to sew this end down in the sewing machine to make sure that it stays in place. Because if you don't do this before you sew your pieces together, then you might lose the elastic when you unhook the safety pin from it. So I'm going to pull my safety pin out where I can see it. And then I'm going to make sure it's past that area. Then I'm going to lower my needle. Let me think. How much of an inseam? I might want to wait. Actually, I want to move my needle back to the other side. Okay. That way I'm going to sew closer to where the edge is. And that's where I want to sew. Alright, so let's lower that. I'm going to sew forward. And sorry about bumping that. And then I'm going to reverse. I'm going to reverse again. Alright, I think that'll hold in place pretty good. Alright, so I'm going to move back over here and take this out from here. And I'm going to cut all of my threads loose from it. And I can go ahead and undo my safety pin because that elastic is not going to move now. So here we go. Get all of these threads out of the way. Alrighty. And I guess I can snip off the excess of the elastic that was fraying there. Alright, so now we've got the elastic on both sides. So now we're going to line up the edges together, and we want the right sides to be facing each other when we do this. So now I'm going to actually pin my fabric together before I sew this part. So let me get some pins here. And I'm going to start on this end where the elastic is located, because you want to make sure that you got your edges lined up together. And the bottom and the top. Make sure that's, and if you really want to make sure that's holding in place, another thing I like to use these clips to hold things in place too, because that's an area that would be really hard to pin. So now I'm just going to pin all the way down my edge here, because I'm going to be sewing this edge together. Wow, it's really raining out there, it sounds like. And you just want to just make sure your bottom fabric and your top fabric are lined up together when you're pinning it. And I'm spacing out by, I don't know, 1 inch to 2 inches apart whenever I'm pinning this. And I do want to make sure that my bottom edge is lined up too. So before I get down there, I'm going to go ahead and pin it just to make sure that everything stays really straight. Lay it down. I'm doing this at a weird angle, so it felt like I was not getting things necessarily straight. Okay, so I'm going to look on my other side and make sure that my fabric is not, it's completely lined up instead of overlapping incorrectly. Okay, so now I've got my edges pinned. That's probably one of the most things that's taken the longest just to do this time. So I'm going to switch back over to the sewing machine and tilt forward again here. Move the scissors out of the way. And I'm going to start at this bottom edge for sewing. And this is going to be the thickest edge to sew. Well, everything's folding the wrong way. Alright, so. And I'm going to start a little ways in there and keep it lined up with the edge of my sewing foot there. And I'm going to actually make my stitches a little bit longer in this area because this is a bulky spot to sew. And actually, I think they say to do a 1/2 inch from the edge. So I'm going to move my needle back to the furthest position, because way over there I'm going to have more of a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And something that's bulky, you don't want to be really, really close to the edge when you're sewing it. So I'm going to scoot it over just a little bit more so it'll be closer to that line that I had it on earlier whenever I was sewing my 1/2 inch edge there. So I'm going to put that in the fabric. Oh, just messed up my camera, I think, possibly. Make sure that y'all can see what I'm doing, even though it's hard for me to get my hands in here. And I'm going to actually manually sew this forward a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to push down the lever and actually sew backwards. And I'm going to do one more back stitch. Oh, went off the fabric, but that's okay. I kind of wanted to do that. Okay. Okay. And I really don't want a longer stitch length from here on out. So I'm going to change my stitch length back to where I had it before to have a shorter stitch length. Because the rest of this, what I'm sewing, is not a thick fabric. It's just very thin. So now I'm going to try to keep that lined up. That's probably going to be the hardest part, is just sewing that little piece right there. That bulky piece. The rest of this is just a regular stitch, and the fabric's flat, so. This is a really good beginner's project. And it's a fun one to do as gifts for people. You just could find out what they decorate their kitchen in, and you could get some fabric that has that decor on it and make them a bag to go along with their kitchen. Alrighty. like this is not lined up as nicely as I would like it to, so I'm going to move it just a tiny bit. Okay, and it's almost to the edge. I think I'll do one more stitch and then back stitch. All right. Okay, so now we've got one other thing we're going to do. I'm going to get this out of here. And cut the threads. You're going to need your piece of ribbon. I'm just going to lay that there. And I'm going to cut off my excess threads that was on the bottom of it. Alright. So, well, I guess I'll move over here just so you can see what I'm going to be doing better. So we've got a ribbon and the back edge of this. So, what I'm going to do, because I want my ribbon to be right at the back seam of the project, so I'm going to fold it. Well, one thing that they say to do, and I guess I should do this before I sew it down, this seam right here that we have, the fabric might actually fray on you. So if you don't have a serger to serge that edge, get some pinking shears and cut this. So I'm going to do that real quick. Let's see, I'm just going to cut the edges, the very edge of this. Hope we don't have any more flooding from all of this rain. Okay, so I just cut all the way down my edge there for my pinking shears. Oh, I kind of folded this edge up a little bit whenever I was sewing it, but that's okay. Alright, so I'll lay that flat, and then I'm going to, you could even get your iron and flatten that out, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. But I'm going to take my ribbon and I'm going to line it up with the edge, or right there with the seam, where it's lined up perfectly with the seam. And then we're going to sew that in place. And you want to kind of sew it, let's see, I better move it down a little bit, where the other line is, so it'll all line up. So I don't think I can really necessarily pin that in place, so I'm going to try to hold it in place while I'm sewing it. And I'm going to take this free arm part off of my sewing machine so I can fit this over the edge of my machine. So I want to flatten that out and then get my ribbon and place my ribbon over that edge. And like I said, I want to line that up with where I had sewn the other one, the other line before. So I'm going to pull that up under there. And let's see. Get it lined up as best I can. Let's see, I'm going to lower this to see where it's going to hit, and it's not going to hit where I want it to. So I'm going to move my needle to where it's going to line up. Okay. So I'm going to sew forward. One more. going to back up. I'm going to sew it over again because this will have some weight on it. So I think that should be good. Went over it several times. Okay, and that's the finishing touches of that. So let's lift this up, pull that out, and where's my regular scissors at so I can cut this loose and cut off my excess threads, and then I will turn it right side out after I cut my threads. Even raise this up just a little bit so we can kind of give you a better view of the project. Oh, yeah, I love it when the camera just flips down like that. This stand does not hold in place quite as well as my other one. Okay, so we're going to turn this right side out. There's my elastic end. And my ribbon is kind of small, but I didn't want a really long one. Okay, so that is the finished project. I guess I could turn it this way, you could see it a little bit better. So you would just hang this on your wall with the little ribbon and then put your plastic bags towards the top area, and this would be the bottom that you would pull it out of, and that's why you have the elastic in there to make it smaller at that end. So that's this project for this week. Again, we won't have another Crafting with Opal program for 2 weeks. We're doing this every other week now, so next week there won't be a program, but the following Thursday, which will be the first Thursday in June, which will be June 3rd, we will do a butterfly garden program, and where will be my coworker Joe and I will show you how to start a butterfly garden. We've actually started one here at the library, and it's kind of been an interesting, fun thing to learn about. I did not know there was so much more involved in having a butterfly garden beyond, oh, isn't that fitting? These have butterflies on. I did not do that on purpose, but that's fun. Anyway, you will be able to sign up for that program, and what you will get for the program if you sign up for it is some plants that are that will attract butterflies. So if you're interested in doing that program, call next week. I think starting Wednesday of next week, I should have the sign-up sheet available for that program. The reason we're starting on Wednesday of next week is because I'm going to be gone over the weekend, and usually I start on a Friday where you can sign up for supplies, but I don't want to have to ask someone to put my sign-up sheet out for me, so that's why we're going to make it available earlier. Hopefully you won't forget about the program. I'm going to reverse this, and, well, there's the top of my head. So anyway, if you're interested in trying out the butterfly garden program, like I said, call next Wednesday, and you can sign up for supplies. You'll get a plant, some soil, and some fertilizer for that program. I'm not sure if I'll have handouts for the program yet or not. If I can get something together that's got some basic directions in it, I will, but we'll probably just talk about it in the program instead of actually having directions, because I don't think it's really anything you'd need directions for. We're just going to cover things that you can do to help keep butterflies around and stay in your garden area. I thought that was kind of neat whenever I learned about it, so I thought we would try that out. And then after that program in June, 2 weeks after that one, we will have another quilling class. And that one's going to be done by Jody this time. And she's going to show you how to quill a bookmark that's got an owl on it. And I thought that would be a fun craft because it's going to go along with our summer reading club program theme, which is Tells and Tales. So, and the butterfly garden, I think, kind of goes along a little bit with SRC or summer reading club too, because it has butterflies. But I think technically summer reading club doesn't actually start that week, but sign up will be available for summer reading club on that week though. All right, that's it for this one, and please check in with us in a couple of weeks if you want to do or follow us along with the butterfly garden and find out about when you can get supplies for the programs after that. So that's it. See you next time. Bye-bye.